having, conversations about relationships. And so that's something that I do all the time. And I got a funny feeling that that's something that you do a lot of. Relationships are a key part of who we are, a key part of what our lives are. And
Are you wanting this to be filmed, or are you just
no. We're filming.
Oh, because you didn't do an intro or anything.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ease into that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I
Right.
thought you were just setting the stage, but you sounded
Well,
pretty official. So
right.
I thought,
So
ooh, are we on, Joan? I didn't get a 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Right.
All right. Now
Right.
my mind is right.
Right. And so the conversation that we're going to have today really is about empathy. Now, so one of the interesting pieces of what I used to do for the Department of Defense was suicide prevention. And so one of the things that we learned is that relationships is the number one stressor for soldiers who were suiciding back when I was working for the Department of Defense.
Right. Isn't that fascinating that it's not combat experience, it's
Wow.
relationships. I remember when you told me that the first time, it was shocking to me, but it made so much sense
Right.
at the same time.
Yeah, because I'll have the conversation about combat, and contrary to popular belief, Vietnam wasn't the worst war. Watch this. All wars are horrible.
Right.
And so, I'd ask the question of the soldiers and veterans who suicided. Do you think that combat had a lot to do with that? And in an audience of 1,000 people, everybody raised their hand and say, wow, I know the correlation between suicide and combat has to be high. But the truth is that soldiers who deployed and fought in combat and soldiers who were stateside and never went abroad to fight had similar rates of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So then the question became, so what is it that would make a soldier suicide? And we found that the number one thing was relationships. So that by itself is a big thing. Wow. Wow, relationships? But there is a connection that we discovered that began to make sense, and a connection that didn't seem to really go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we think about suicide, what we realize is that thing that changes a soldier isn't always combat.
Well, combat will take a toll, but that doesn't mean it leads to suicide.
Right. So here is one of the things that I teach now. That one of the biggest things that the military takes away from soldiers, and when I say soldiers, of course, I'm talking airmen, sailors, Marines.
Military members.
Military. One of the biggest things that they take away on purpose, and they never give it back. And it's the thing that enables them to be a soldier. So when you ask most soldiers, so what are you trained to do? And the response that you'll oftentimes get is, I'm a trained killer.
Right.
But to do that, during basic training or boot camp, something had to change. And so one of the things that I believe changes is that the thing that they take away, or they work really hard to take it away, and let me say that the military is good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that they want to take away is empathy.
100%. How do you kill someone that you feel empathetic towards?
So if I have a gun on somebody whose life I'm about to take, do I want to be thinking about their mother at home?
Right.
Do I want to be thinking about whether or not they have children or a wife? So in combat, having my empathy removed, taken away, absent, makes sense.
Well, do you think that it is empathy for the enemy? Because I think there's a lot of empathy for your fellow brothers and sisters in combat.
Let me share something crazy with you.
Okay.
And because I primarily work with Vietnam vets, this is the group that, I'm probably primarily referencing. They were taught in Vietnam not to get close to their soldiers at arms because you might lose them.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if that's still the case because a lot of the military members that I've worked with are Iraq and Afghanistan vets. And what I think may contribute to suicide is survivor's guilt. If you live or if you're unmaimed and someone close to you has lost a limb or some other serious effect or died, then there's this insane amount of guilt that why did I live and they died, or why am I whole and they've been damaged? And I think that comes from empathy for fellow soldiers, but definitely not for the enemy.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Well, I
Different
think,
wars, different approaches, perhaps.
and is it
Maybe
possible that there are multiple factors?
Yeah, of course.
That
of
go.
course. Like your CO and who they are and what they think, right? And I think another factor that has to come into play, and I thought this is what you were going to tell me that the military takes away, is the relationships with people back home. Even though they still exist, yes, you have a spouse, a girlfriend, parents, children, whatever, and the military seems to, especially with their yellow ribbon programs for Guard and Reserves, they seem to try to support family members, but I think that the message that military members may get is God and country come before family. And so they do kind of do something to weaken those bonds so that our military members can tolerate the separation for as long as they're separated. That's really challenging. And then when they come back, that again, the military doesn't do a great job at helping them reconnect. There's still that division, and part of the division is no civilian will ever understand what you've been through, so don't talk to them about what you've been through. So then there's that, I have to go to the basement where I'm all alone and I'm playing my war video games to try to keep my sanity, but I can't talk to people about what I've been through. And people want to know. Some of them do. They want the military member to share with the people that love them, but I don't know that they're able to really do that comfortably, not comfortably for sure, and maybe not at all.
And so in combat, too, you also asked the question, is how the soldier feels, is that really important? Or is the most important thing the mission?
Right. I think they're taught not to feel in the mission, right? If you feel, stuff that down. That has no place in the mission. They call it battle mind. I've heard it called battle mind, which is put on the blinders, don't think about anything else but accomplishing the mission. And that includes don't emote.
Right. So if I have a friend who's killed in combat, it may be nothing for the first sergeant to say, go put Johnson in a bag, and expect that I don't feel that. So in combat, having my empathy removed makes a lot of sense. So
given what you're being called to do.
Given what you're being called to do. Now, the question then becomes, I was in combat last week, and I've heard instances where soldiers were in combat yesterday, and then they come back home, and they have the same mindset and
Yeah.
the same training of the person who was in Baghdad, Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam. Right? And so if I had no empathy in combat, and it was something that potentially saved my life, because one of the things that I hear from soldiers a lot is that hesitation can get you killed.
Yeah. I've often heard, if it's me or them, it's going to be them.
Okay. Right.
And that speaks to the hesitation.
Right. So no hesitation. So if you're told to take a life, you don't ask why.
That's right.
Right. So empathy, gone. I'm in combat, it makes sense. I come home and now I'm in a relationship. And so I wonder, what does it look like for me to be in a relationship and have no empathy? And for the people who may not understand what empathy is, and I'll kind of start it, and if you have some more ideas, you can share.
Sure.
Empathy is caring about what somebody else feels, caring what somebody else is thinking, caring about somebody else's situation or circumstances, what precipitating factors contributed to them making that decision or being where they are. And, pardon my language, but the way that, I hear soldiers talk about it is caring is giving a shit.
Mm-hmm.
Having no empathy is just the opposite.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty straightforward way of talking about empathy. I like to add a little bit more to that, and that would be being able to feel what the other person feels. So if you're sad in front of me, I can feel that sadness. I recognize it's not my sadness, but I feel yours. Or if you're angry, some righteous indignation, I can feel that too. If you're happy, I can feel that. So to me, it's more than just an intellectual I can understand. It's actually an emotive sharing experience. And as you were talking, I had one other thought, because we talked about military members having to tamp down any emotions that they may be experiencing, except for one. In combat, they can be as angry as they want to be and should be, because how do you feel love for your fellow man and then kill them? You have to be angry and enraged, and then you come back home, and what do you do with this rage that you've had to call on to do your work? You still have it. Your child does something that annoys you. You may respond way over the top to that, because you know how to go from 0 to 100, maybe 0 to 120,
Right.
just like that when you're...
Let me be clear, most of the soldiers that I know are never at 0.
True story. Just like they're never relaxed.
Right. Exactly. So so if I'm in a relationship and I have no empathy, so we I talked a little bit about kind of how to define it. What does it look like if I'm in a relationship and I don't care about what you feel?
Right. And you can't feel it too. Yeah.
Yes.
It looks like a very distant, detached, cold human in the midst of what's supposed to be a warm, caring, supportive relationship.
So as a partner in a relationship with somebody with no empathy, who doesn't want to hear the excuses, that I'm offering, who doesn't want to hear the reasons why I can't wash the dishes right, doesn't understand why I've been at work all day and dinner's not ready yet.
Or why I want to spend time with my brothers in arms instead of time at home playing with the kids.
Right. So with no empathy now, I'm afraid that, if somebody's in a relationship with somebody with no empathy, that potentially can be a scary, dangerous, unsafe place emotionally. Have you heard this phrase? Walking on
Eggshells.
eggshells. Is that a real thing?
Of course it is. Of course it is. And that's to keep the rage at bay, right? So you walk on eggshells to keep the person from giving them any reason to fly off the handle. But you can't stop it. If it's in someone, it's leaking out, whatever's going on around them. You could do nothing. You could say good morning and that could trigger a rage. But as we're sitting here, this isn't a conversation that we've ever had before. One of the things I'm also considering is I think that the family members left behind may also have some empathy depletion at the same time, because how can they have empathy for a military member coming home from combat if they've never been in combat themselves and their family member isn't sharing anything about it with them? So that could help further the empathy. It could provide more of a frustration. I want to understand, I want to feel what you feel, I want to help you, but the military member's trying so hard to protect family members from the ugliness that they've been in, and they may not want them to know the things that they had to do, that it would affect the relationship. How could anyone love me if I tell you the things that I did while I was there? So there can be a big disconnect in the relationships on both sides. It's not just one way.
You know this is a rabbit hole, right?
Well, we like to go down rabbit holes. That's what we do together.
Right, because I think about the challenge of the family at home has learned to live without the soldier.
And now they're trying to reintegrate, but they're not sure they want to let him in because there's a difference. This is not the person that left. This is a different person, maybe an angrier person, maybe a more sullen person who isolates themselves, and it disrupts the routine.
Wow. And so when I come back in, so one of the things, and I don't know if it's just the military, or is it that men think they're right?
Oh, women have a good bit of that, but women are more willing, I think, for the sake of the relationship, to say, okay, we'll give it to you.
Okay.
Just because being in a relationship is sometimes more valued, perhaps, by the women. Not always. I don't want to be stereotypical about that, but there are some truths.
Yeah. So if I'm tough as nails, badass, veteran combat, or even just a man, are men good at being touchy-feely?
I think that's something, at least in our culture and at this time in our human evolution, I think there are men who are learning to do that. I think I have grandchildren. I have some boys and some girls, and they've been taught in school to identify feelings and to be able to say what they're feeling, which I find amazing, because when I was in school, we never talked about feelings in school. That was not, I didn't learn happy, sad, mad, anxious. We didn't talk about those things. But my grandchildren have that capacity because it's something that was taught in school. Now, I don't know if it's taught everywhere, because my grandchildren all go to the same school, so maybe it's just in that school, but I think...
They're probably homeschooled getting this.
No, no, they're not homeschooled, but I do think there's something to be said for social and emotional learning, and I think that may be part of a lot of the curriculums to help kids be more social and connected and able to express emotions. But I believe, and we know the research, I can't tell you the exact number, but I think it's something like this. I should look it up to be able to say for sure, but I think it's something like men speak 13,000 words in a day, and women speak 20,000 words in a day.
Wow.
So what that tells me is that men are either more concise communicators, or women just talk more than men. So when a woman wants to talk, that can strike fear in the heart of a man, because talking, communicating verbally may not be their strongest
Can I say one
skill.
of the scariest things that a woman can say to a man is, we need to talk.
Right, right. That's what I mean, right.
In a man's mind, there's no way in the world that this is going to be something positive, something good. This
I want
is
to
not
tell you
going
how
to turn
much
out
I
well.
love you.
That's not what that means.
Yeah, no,
we
it's
need
not.
to talk.
We have a problem, and the woman is going to out-talk the man, so the man already knows I'm starting at a deficit in this conversation before we even start.
So as men, where do we even learn
About,
to feel?
learn to feel. I don't know.
Learn how to express feelings and emotion. Is it even a manly thing, other than anger?
Well, that's right. There are people who would say that's sissy stuff, to use an expression, or metrosexual, or some kind of a put down about men who are more in touch with their feminine side and can have conversations like this. It doesn't make you feminine, and to many women, it makes you more attractive. But it also is not something that's known across the board that this is a good thing for men to be able to do. In fact, I think there's more people who would say it's not manly to talk about your feelings.
So how do I have
whatever manly is?
Right. So how do I have a healthy relationship if I'm not good at sharing how I feel, and if my empathy is impaired, damaged, lacking, non-existent, which means that I don't care how you feel? How do we communicate in a healthy way?
So what I would say from where I sit and what I do with people, I would say that's the time you need to start working on the relationship you have with yourself first. Before you try to reconnect with someone that you love or care about, you got to reconnect with yourself first. Because what's happened in battle and military service is you've lost track of who you are as an individual. You've become part of a strike force, part of a combat unit. And so how do you go from I'm a member of this team with this mission to I am a man with a family that I love? And how do you transition that team from combat to loving, caring, protecting relationships?
Yeah, so now I'm wondering if are most relationships actually a team, or is it the men versus the women, the husbands versus the wives?
I think the healthy relationships are viewed by both as teams, and the ones that are struggling are individuals in competition with one another. Yeah, I've seen that a lot with people who come to me, because I wrote a book, Secrets of Happy Couples, so I do a lot of work with couples, and depending on who it is, most of the time, the people who make appointments with me are women. But I have had some men make appointments because they're the ones that are wanting to fix the relationship. And if they come in together, my first question is, are you really here because you want help for the relationship? Or are you basically just checking the box before you go to divorce court? Because that's a real thing. People don't really want help. They just want to say, well, I tried and it didn't work. So if one of them is not really there because they want help with the relationship, then I'll work with the one that does want the help. And I'll tell the other one, you don't have to come anymore. I don't need two people in the room to affect and to beneficially change a relationship. You can work with one person, and that's about getting aligned with who you are and what you want from your relationships and deciding how you want to navigate that with a partner who's not looking to make any changes.
Wow. So I know back in the day, the conversation, with your parents and your grandparents where, they were married 50 years, they were married 60 years. And so is longevity our goal, or is it now that we're thinking that there's more to relationship? It's not just about taking care of daddy or granddaddy, that we can take care of mom and we can take care of grandma, and sexually, grandma could have needs too. I know back in the day that wasn't a conversation.
No, and today it may still not be a conversation in a lot of places, but I do think that longevity is not the number one factor in the health of a relationship. I know many people who have been together. You see them out at restaurants all the time. They're out maybe celebrating an anniversary or a birthday, and they sit across the table from one another and they don't even talk to each other. They're looking around the room, not talking to each other because they're not really connected, but they've been married 60 years.
Wow.
Okay, congratulations, you made it 60 years. I like to ask people, do you like your partner? They'll tell me, oh yes, I love her, I love him. Love in a biblical sense, love in a, I love you as a fellow human being. I might say, I love you, Richard. You might say, you love me too.
Good.
But that doesn't mean we're in love. That doesn't mean you actually like the person that you've been married to for 50 or 60 years, that you have anything in common, that you can tell your fears and your dreams to. And I think maybe that's not our partner, but we need to have a person that we can share those things with if we don't already, if it isn't our partner.
Is it possible that I could love you, care about you, and not know what it looks like or feels like to be in a healthy relationship?
Yeah, sure, of course. Of course. There are people in relationships who love and care for their partner, and their partner might be abusive towards them, whether it's verbally or just ignores them, doesn't consider them, lives their life, separate lives. I know people who live like that. They'll say they love one another, they care for one another. And I also know people in relationships who may have affairs with people outside of the relationship. It doesn't mean that they don't love their partner. It might mean that their partner is not very expressive sexually and doesn't meet the needs of their spouse or their full-time partner, and they find a way to get those needs met outside of the relationship. I don't have a judgment about that one way or the other, except I think that when that happens, the best thing is when it's open and the other person knows, so that it's not a discovery down the road that just completely blows the whole thing up. I like that to be a conversation ahead of time, but it doesn't always happen like that.
All right, so for full disclosure, I believe that premarital counseling for most people is a joke. Let me tell you why I believe that.
Okay.
I believe that there are many people, women in particular, who want the marriage. They want to be wedded and to have the difficult conversation about all the things that disturb me, the things that you do, the things that you say, your lack of empathy,
Your friends, your independence.
If I
Your friendship with that woman.
Come on now, come on. If I have conversations about all of those things pre-marriage,
There aren't going to be a marriage.
I don't know if that's a fear or if actually that's a real fear
It's a
of
huge
something
fear
that could
and
manifest.
risk. It's a big risk. I know many people, mainly women like you say, who are marrying someone with the, quote, raw material to be the right person for them.
Not the raw
The
material.
raw material. They want to mold you and shape you into their perfect partner. So they're not going to bring up the things that they don't like initially, because that could risk you following through. So when it's so funny. But it's funny and tragic at the same time. Because you marry this person that isn't right for you. You know it going in. But you think that with love, if you love them enough, you'll mold them into the person you want them to be. And I think the biggest question in premarital counseling is, for the woman, if this man sitting in front of you never changes from who they are today, do you want to marry him anyway? And I don't know what the answer to that question would be. Yeah. If this is who you got for the rest of your life, is this enough?
Let me say this. Breaking the silence, mental health, conversations with Kim Olver and Richard Dawes. We're just tapping the surface, and man, we're really grateful that you tuned in. This is a conversation that I think will continue to evolve and unfold. If we met every week for the next 10 years, we couldn't get it all in. So let us encourage you to check in, to have these conversations with us, conversations that maybe you have in private, conversations perhaps that you don't have at all. Let's take the lid off of Pandora's box and talk about some stuff. Kim Olver, Richard Doss, thank you for joining us.
I just want to say, if you have any topics or areas that you would like Richard and I to focus on in future videos, just drop a comment here. Send us an email at the address that's on the screen.